Okay, so we want to talk about the trust issue, Nick.
Trust. Yeah, and maybe for context, this comes from this ethos in Bitcoin that says don't trust, verify.
I don't like it.
Yeah, but I mean, I bet you already do it in a lot of cases, right?
I do it
If I
a
said,
lot.
if you want to lose weight, take this pill, I don't think you would blindly say, okay, I'll do that. You know,
No, but to
you would
be fair,
probably verify it and be like,
I do it with money though, right?
yeah, I mean, money's a tricky one because we've all grown up being programmed that our money, there's no problem with our money. Like it's never been
Mm-hmm.
something that's been said. And we're not even taught how to understand money. Therefore, all you can do is trust that the national currency you're born into works. And
Right.
on the surface, like, if you don't live in Venezuela, where it's very obvious that the money's broken, um, then it's okay to trust. But I think the whole thing that like there's a fine line, right? The whole notion of like a trustless world, it's like, well, I think a society that functions well, that has humans in it, probably needs to rely on trust, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I have to trust that when I walk on the street, on the sidewalk, that someone driving a car is not going to run me over, right? There's some element of trust there. When I go and buy an apple from a guy, I trust that it hasn't, that it's not diseased or it hasn't been poisoned or something. So like, I think there's the different levels of trust, and it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like the degree to which something, a decision or directive that's being given to you is going to affect your life probably determines the amount of research you should do to figure out whether what you're being told is the truth or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not, the notion is not don't trust anyone. It's maybe take more ownership into determining who you should trust. Maybe that's a better
Mm-hmm.
one, right?
And
And
so, oh,
yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, give more context, which is that the my FUD, my fear, uncertainty, and doubt with Bitcoin, but also in the world in general, right? So I am bringing up this issue with you around um, where I hear this a lot, right? Don't trust, verify within the framework of Bitcoin, which gives me resistance because um, Bitcoin is so new. And I think to myself, and I do trust you. And from everything I've read and listened to so far in my infancy learning process around Bitcoin, I do get all the good feels around like what the philosophy is and what the framework is and what the groundwork is being laid on. But I do get a red flag about don't trust, verify, because what I was saying is that it perpetuates this notion of always having to be monitoring and being on high alert because you're being taken advantage of. And it seems to me that I get what you're saying intellectually about we do trust. I mean, we go through our day and we're always scanning the horizon for threats on some level anyway. And maybe when it comes to money, I do recognize that there's like some shady business going on. And maybe my life is too busy and I'm too caught up in what I'm trying to accomplish with my work and the people around me that I do just want to trust that everything's working fine. And I get the idea that it's not. But I think to myself, well, you say trust no one, verify, and that includes you, which I think you've always said, like, don't trust. We've always said, even in the Foot Nerd program, the Foot Collective, like, don't trust me, do your freaking research, like we're just here to share our experience. And I think that's what you're saying too. So I get that, but on a psychological level, and I guess coming from like I guess I have trust issues with humans anyway, like it makes me not want to trust. Like saying trust no one, verify pushes me in the direction of not even trusting that. Like I'm like, I just don't want to even, I just want to go be with the flowers and the bees and the butterflies because I freaking trust them. And so I guess like maybe my question to you is, how like when I listened to this like nighttime stories for adults called Nothing Much Happens, and every single episode she says this might not be your first time, but it's somebody's first time listening. And I wonder if like there's some kind of way to build into the language that something like, you can trust us or something. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's almost like when you meet someone for the first time, you're verifying their credibility, right?
Yeah.
Through the interaction you
Mhm.
have, you're like verifying their vibes, right?
Mhm.
Like you're getting an idea about this person.
Mhm. Mhm.
And every time you have an interaction with someone, you're kind of verifying, like, is this
Mhm.
person worth talking to? Should I
Mhm.
trust this person? Have they tried to steal from me?
Mhm.
Like all these things. And so the more positive interactions you have with someone, um, the more you can trust, right? So
Mhm.
it's like the idea is giving full blind trust to someone makes it really easy to be taken advantage of. And the reality is that most people, like the people who are determining how money works right now,
Mhm.
I think they genuinely think that they're doing a good job and that money works
Mhm.
because it's inconvenient for them to admit that reality is telling them money doesn't work.
Mhm.
And so it's not that people aren't trustworthy, it's that sometimes humans make mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's okay because we're going to make mistakes too.
Mhm.
And if we all have some basic tools on how to verify things, like we all have the basic tools of critical thinking and being resourceful enough to look things up, to literally just spend a bit of your attention diving into a path of inquiry to being like, okay, I don't have to know every detail about this, but like, is there anything to show that I shouldn't trust this thing? Right. Okay. Here's a
Mhm.
medical procedure I'm being told to take. Well, I'm going to do a little bit of research and see if there's any doubt that I should be, hesitant or I should do my own research because there's a lot at stake here. Right. A medical
Mhm.
procedure has a lot at stake for me, for my health. Therefore, I should probably do a little bit of research and investigation to make sure that people that are telling me what to do aren't biased, aren't mistaken, which is, like I said, the most
Mhm.
important one. And I think if everyone, like, we should all have those fundamental tools. Like, what is more important to learn in school than to understand how to make sense of the world,
Mhm.
independent of only listening to other people that are supposed to be the knowers?
Yeah.
So I think at a basic level, we all verify all the time in different
Mhm.
ways, in different levels of rigor. The more impact something is going to have on you, probably the more necessity there is to do a little bit more verification. And the notion is not that all humans are untrustworthy. It's that sometimes people make mistakes or are abiding by certain incentives that may not be in alignment with your interest. So you should probably just verify. And once you've verified enough that someone can be trusted or something like the Bitcoin protocol can be trusted, you don't have to
Mhm.
constantly verify. If someone says they sent you money, the cool thing about Bitcoin is you don't have to be like, okay, I hope that money gets to my account. It's like you can literally check and see if that transaction on the public ledger is there, so
Mhm.
that you, instead of hoping you receive the money, you're receiving the money.
Mhm.
So, but I think with health, it's like everyone should be given a bit more ability to verify what health is, which includes
Mhm.
personal experience. That's a really big element of it. So that we're not at the mercy of trusting something like medicine, which is well intentioned, but is also fallible, is also
Mhm.
able to be corrupted by incentives that don't align with human health. So, yeah, the intention is not don't trust anyone. It's to
Yeah.
take a little bit more responsibility for making sure something is true or a reflection of the truth instead of just taking it on.
Well, it's
Someone
doing
has
it.
the label expert doesn't mean you have to believe them.
Yeah. And it does align. So, I mean, it aligns just along the same language as what we talk about with health, right? Like you don't just you don't just read the book, Katie Bowman book. You don't just read it and be like, oh yeah, that that's health. You have to do the experiments physically. So, I mean, I think you're just saying the exact same thing. Like, don't. It's another way of saying like, don't trust. Verify by doing the experimentations for yourself. Like, you
Yes.
can trust. You can trust if you experiment, I guess. Like you can trust your knowledge base, especially when you do the research, you learn about it, and then you do the experimentation and see for yourself.
Yeah,
That's what you're
and
saying.
you put what you're hearing or what you're being told to the test with reality, right? Like if someone
Yeah.
says, Ruth, I just did this new diet, it's a vegan diet, it's the best thing ever, I feel so good. You can probably trust that that person's telling the truth, that from their unequivocal experience, they feel better having eaten
Yeah.
this way.
Yeah.
So don't trust, verify applied there would be, okay, I trust that this person's having a good experience. I'm going to be open minded enough to trying it. But I'm also going to make sure that if I eat that way and I feel like shit, I'm verifying that maybe it's not the best for me because we're all
Hmm.
different. And so, like, this whole
Hmm.
don't trust, verify means in that context really just means like be open-minded to trying something, but be
Mhm.
literate enough to hear the signals your body's telling you so that you determine for yourself what the truth is for you. And you
Nice.
verify that by putting it through experiments, by putting it through
Yeah.
your
Rigor.
lens of reality. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not don't trust that person. It's just like, okay, I trust that that's good for that person, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily good for me. Like if the person printing all the money says, oh, it's real good, we're going to be okay, and they're benefiting from that. Okay. They might be benefiting, but is that coming at my expense? And the only way to verify that is like understand money a little bit so that you
Mhm.
can know the red flags when you see them. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, my FUD has been softened.
softened. That's good. Everyone should be
Ooh,
skeptical. I
kind of
think
like
it's
this
good to be
Lori.
a skeptic.
I know. I try to be, I'm just, I'm trying to be more trusting, but like not suspicious. I'm not
Yeah.
suspicious of Bitcoin at all. I just, it's kind of like going, so do you know, like, La Fontaine's parable about the dog and the wolf?
No, do tell.
Where okay, so there's the story of the wild wolf who is just skin and bones, and the fat domesticated dog lives in the neighborhood. And so at night the wolf comes down, and one fat happy dog goes a little too far from his house, and he thinks he's going to pounce, but then he looks at the dog and he's like, that dog could probably take me down. So he was going to try to use flattery instead. So he says to the fat happy shiny coated dog, um, how did you get that beautiful coat? And then the dog says, oh no, not I didn't have to do hardly anything at all. I just have these masters, these people that are here, and I chase away the beggars and people with canes, um, and in exchange I get like lots of sugar and meats, and not to mention the caresses and the snuggles and the human admiration. Um, and then the wolf is convinced that he wants to then go and do that too. When they turn around to start walking back towards the house, the wolf notices this barren chafe spot on the dog's neck, and he says, wait a minute, what is that? And the dog says, oh, just a trifle. That's where the collar, um, you know, holds me. I have to stay close to the house, and it's the collar that tethers me there. And then the wolf runs into the hills.
There you go. Smart wolf.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of that.
He was trusting, but he also verified.
Yeah, he verified. He was like, what the hell is that on your neck? What are you, a slave?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm out of here.
Yeah, it's like, the person living in the woods could see the like plump human and be like, oh, that seems like a great existence. And he was
I
like,
want to
yeah, I
sit
got
by your
TV.
fire.
Uber delivers me food. I don't need a
I sit on
fire.
this
There's like,
couch all day.
yeah. And it's like, oh, that could be good. It seems more convenient and comfortable. And then it's like, are you happy? No. It's
I
like, all right,
know.
fuck
Let me
that.
go
That's
sit
not
on,
worth it.
I'll go sit on that couch with you. And then you're like,
Yeah. You're like, oh, my back hurts. They're like, oh
my
yeah, we
back.
just got used to that. My back always hurts, but it's just
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah. I can't poop or
Yeah.
have sex or anything comfortably, but this is great.
But this is great. It's super comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comfortably numb. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so that's the wolf and the dog, Nick.
Nice.
Um,
Good parable.
do you want to talk about that article a little bit?
Yeah. By the one about teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a really good article. Even it was applied to Bitcoin, but I don't even think like you can take all the Bitcoin stuff out of it and it's still just as magical. I don't have it on me right now, but I think there's just a lot of, wherever we post this, if we post that article and let people read it themselves, I think this whole notion that, I've started to think of this a little bit where it's like being a teacher is because students decide to listen to you. It doesn't mean that you have a title. That title is, I think this whole notion that, okay, in this community of foot nerds and health guides, let's put them all into one community. We will all be students. We are all students of the process of health. We're all learning every day from each other and from our own experience. But some people will be teachers in this community. And the ones who will be teachers are probably the ones who have explored the most vastness of the health landscape, who are open-minded to just exploring radically. And who've also put in the time to get clear on what they've get clear on extracting the essence from really what they've learned, right? You have all this data And in order to extract the meaningful principles out of that data that can apply to anyone and help anyone, you have to put in time getting clear on how to articulate it. And even just if you're clear on it, being able to explain it to someone else requires practice. And you have to know something so much deeper to teach it, right? Like this whole notion that you can fly a helicopter, but teaching someone else how to fly a helicopter is an order of magnitude more difficult, because explaining it in simple terms with an understanding of where you came from and how things connected with you when they were taught to you. So this whole notion that like we're a community of students, some of us are teachers, the ones who are teachers are there because students are deciding to listen to them, not because they're like, I'm the teacher, everyone listen to me. It's like, it's almost based on the understanding that person's done a lot of work, and just the stuff that they've shared, they're good at explaining it, and they have a vast amount of knowledge. So yeah, I think it's a really good article.
Well, that, and the article, for context, if our nerds are listening, but the context was like Bitcoin taught this, the author of the article, I don't remember who it is, what it means to be a teacher.
Tomer Strolite is his name.
Yeah, Strolite. I was thinking Stromboli, like some kind of Italian sandwich. I didn't want to say it. But the idea, like all of those, like Foot Nerd manifesto ideas, like I have to experience for myself physically, like what it, and internalize what the lesson is before I can articulate it to somebody else. And then the idea that I forget what the quote was, but it was about like how you have this responsibility as a teacher, because you are, you have human beings who are trusting what you are teaching, so that you better like have delved in deep, because you have the privilege of the responsibility to teach. And that was, are you looking it up?
I'm looking at it. So I really like this. To learn requires not just studying what is already known, but exploring that which is not yet known. And then he has these points. I must examine that which has not yet been examined. I must also examine that which has been, but not thoroughly enough. I must contemplate what I have seen and learned. I must try to understand it as clearly as I can. I must use reason, intuition, and emotion.
Can we just go back really quick to the one where it says where it hasn't been examined thoroughly enough? Can we go back to that? Because that to me is exceptional. That is the difference between learning something and then, even if you are experiencing it in your body, it's exceptional because it requires you to proactively take that knowledge a step further and be extremely active in the process, like creating something beyond extrapolating the gems, but then going beyond, and I think that then it creates an extremely fertile ground for that emergence to take place. And I think that is what I see happening with the collaboration of the Foot Nerds creating the Health Guide Project. I'm so impressed. Like, it's a group of 15 people probably who keep adding to this knowledge base, which is what you talked about initially, about emergence, right? So at first I was thinking to myself, it's going to be like 3 people, it's going to be so much work. And like little by little, given enough time and kind of I appreciate the fact that you allow us to go slowly, because I'm used to being kind of pushed and like time is of the essence and being efficient. And this whole idea about slowing down in order to like really deeply learn something, that's something I've not experienced before. And I think that's what I'm starting to see come through the Foot Nerd community, in the way of like adding to something. We're not just plowing through, because we could have finished and put a whole scaffolding or a skeleton together from 3 weeks ago from what we had, but we didn't. We're just keep going slow and slow, and you're telling us to let it marinate and keep building on it. And it is like there's people coming out of the woodwork just adding brilliant ideas. Nikki Pop.
Yeah. And like, I know with me, if I'm thinking of something, I need to like clarify it's like you go through phases, right? Like the first phase, it's very messy. You're kind of exploring, you put your thoughts down, and then clarifying those thoughts kind of gives your brain a new set of material to work with. And whether
Mhm.
you're actively thinking of it or not, usually your brain is trying to solve a problem that's outstanding in the background. And so if the
Mhm.
problem outstanding is how do we do this together to create like a new system for health, which is very broad, the more we narrow in on what we'll eventually be creating, the more concrete it becomes, and maybe the more concrete the problems become for people to solve in their own heads and then contribute ideas. So yeah, it's really cool. I think taking it slow will result in the best product. Will result in the best framework for how to do this, because it's a pretty important thing, and it's
Mhm.
like we're going to put a lot of work into executing it. We should probably make sure that work is not wasted by ensuring that what we actually want to create has had a good amount of thought put into it, and that we all feel good about it. Right? It
Yeah.
might not be our perfect idea that we came up with ourselves, but it has to be an idea that everyone could be like, okay, well, enough people contributed to this, and now that I'm thinking of it, it does seem like a good idea. So it's like you give people a chance to kind of warm up to suggestions that maybe initially were so far from what their ideal was, or maybe they just didn't have enough information to really think about this. So I think it
Mhm.
like creates a stimulus to go and seek more information, which might just literally be thinking to yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the clarity starts to come through, and the alignment starts to come when we all realize, like, okay, well, there's only a certain amount of ways to solve this problem.
Mhm.
And although we can give our individual input, it's going to come to the point where there's common principles, because there's not a million ways to solve this problem. And sometimes hearing someone else's idea makes you think differently. So yeah, I
Mhm.
think it's cool to watch the process unravel.
Can you go to that part of the article about trusting humans toward the end? Like human having it's like in bold, black, kind
So
of
the
down.
very um, last one is his pledge as a teacher. I don't know if that's what you're talking about.
Oh no, it might be a little farther up.
Hmm. Yeah, it says, above all, I must never mislead. I
Mhm.
must also apply my own style to the lessons I prepare. Um,
Oh, well, they'll read it.
it would be a betrayal of my role as a teacher to pretend to
Yeah.
be knowledgeable about a topic which I am not able to teach. It would be a fraud to claim to know that which I do not know before an audience of trusting human beings, which are students.
Mhm.
And I
And
mean,
that,
it's
well, I
really
just,
subjective, right? The
yes.
knowledge, how
Mhm.
knowledgeable you are about a topic is very subjective, and it really boils down to self-awareness, right? Like I see this all the time, uninformed confidence, where people don't actually understand something and yet are perfectly confident to say that they know the truth. And I think that really boils down to self-awareness,
Mhm.
and just putting in the time to actually understand something instead of just memorizing a tagline or a news headline.
Mhm.
Like, actually understand what's going on, how it works, and have a broader context to speak from, and personal experience to speak from.
I have a question about the other end of the spectrum, though, right? So that makes sense where you, we have to start somewhere naively,
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, I think about like what I've learned in the year and a half I've been in the Foot Nerd program, and I reflect back on, I used to be a personal trainer for this like guy named Hans Bueller. He was a German guy who had this big fancy company. And I was 22 when I was his personal trainer. And when I was little, I worked with him for like 10 years. And he would tell me, Ruth, you used to be so full of shit.
That's great honesty.
No, he's so great. He would call me like when he was sick, he would say, I have a humdinger of a cold.
Nice.
And but I was thinking, like, I look back at the things I said because I innocently I didn't know better, right? You don't know what you don't know. But the other end of the spectrum I want to ask you about is how to encourage people to take a risk, right? Because I think like foot nerds, the community that we're speaking to, some people are perfectly ready to start teaching other people, but maybe because of this, maybe a very enhanced sense of self-awareness, don't embark on the journey to start because, do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me, Nikki Pop.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my own experience, and it's like, once you have done once you've spent a lot of time trying to understand something, the amount of time and the amount of thought you've put into like deciding like, is this actually a fundamental truth in this world? Like, is it really shoes that are messing up our feet? Like at the start, I wasn't that confident that that was the truth, right? It was like an insight. Like, I think this might be true, but let's put it to the test. And every person I speak to, and every time I start to revisit first principles of physiology, where the body adapts based on the inputs it gets, the stronger and stronger my conviction becomes to say that the shoes are messing up our feet. And at a certain point, you hit a conviction level that you're like, this is the truth. Every single thing that I've done in reality, every experiment I've done, every person I've talked to reflects the fact that this is a fundamental truth. And when you hit that point, it's not that you're closed-minded to that not being the truth, but now it's like, okay, well, I got to put that truth into the world to a bunch of people to see what the best criticisms are. And that's either going to strengthen my conviction even more if those criticisms don't end up holding true, or it's going to give me the alternate perspectives that maybe I'm not looking to. And so I think teaching, the threshold of teaching is like, I can teach someone if I know more, have done more work to understand something than that person. The only way to understand if I can teach that person is to ask them questions about what they understand about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if someone says, Ruth, I'm really interested in physics. Like, I want to learn physics. Can you teach me physics? And
Absolutely, I can.
Okay, tell me what you know about physics.
There's these tiny little things bumping around. Do you trust me?
I trust you, Ed, but I'm going to verify to make sure you know what you're talking about, right? So I think that like, if you know more, if you've spent a lot of time trying to understand something, like focused learning about this thing, then you can slowly gain confidence that, okay, I probably know more than the average person. The more time I'm spending learning about this, the more people can learn from me, because I've just spent more time on this thing. And you know, it just comes to a point where like you have to let your confidence based on the work that you know you've put in speak for itself by confidently going and saying, I'm gonna teach my fundamental truths, and I'm gonna see what people say. And my hope is that I get criticism so that I can strengthen those truths that I've learned to be true, or change my mind if better information comes about. And so I think it's really just like, it's like when you go in for a test, right? If you haven't done much studying, you should be really nervous because you're probably going to do shitty because you haven't done the work. If you've done a lot of work and you studied your ass off, you can go into that test with like supreme confidence until you get whopped with the first question that you're like, fuck, I didn't study that. But I think teaching is very similar, right? Like, I would have a very stringent ritual before seminars of like, I would literally rewrite the notes that I was going to read from for 2 hours the night before every seminar. Cause I was just like, this is the only way that I can walk into that seminar and be confident that I know my shit. It's because I've literally put in the time, put in the reps, reviewed it, gotten a good sleep, done a good morning routine. Like, I know I have my shit together because I put in the work to make sure that was the case. But like, if I didn't review my notes, if I got a shitty sleep because I was out partying, and if I didn't get a good morning routine, I probably would be much more anxious and nervous teaching, and I would probably deliver a shitty seminar. And like, that was, you know, so I really think it's confidence comes through the process of learning and engaging with others who are also learning and like really understand this thing well, so that you can like compare, right? Like you can show people what you got. And so I think if you're putting in the work every day and taking your health process seriously and really doing some analytical work to figure out like, what are the truths that I can take out of this experience, which is a very in-depth understanding of my own health experience, and then talking to others who are doing the same. Like, when you've put in enough work, you'll know when you're ready. And you have to want to teach. This is another thing too. I know people that are so freaking smart and have no desire to teach. Therefore, they've got no impetus for them to refine their communication style to be good at teaching. So they're really smart. They have no desire to teach. If they were forced to teach, they probably wouldn't be that good, because they haven't thought about, how do I explain this in simple terms? It's more like, I just want to know the shit out of this and be the expert. And then maybe I'll explain this to someone who wants to teach, who doesn't have to know as much detail, but is good at communicating.
Yes.
So I think there will be teachers that will do the podcast for the Foot Nerd program and the Health Guide certification. There will be other people who are extremely smart, but simply don't want to teach. So I think it's like, once you have done enough work to be well-versed in this topic, once you've determined whether teaching is something that is of interest, because it's the only way you can share what you do and impact other people is to really teach what you know. Once you've made those two decisions, then it's really just being honest with yourself. Like, do I know enough to be able to teach someone and have it be of value?
Yeah.
And then you go from there.
Yeah. All right. You can't, there's very little there to argue with, Nick. I'm looking.
Yeah. And I mean, the reps that you get the first time you teach is always the most nerve-wracking, and it's supposed to be. It means you care about it. I think that's the biggest thing, is like reframing anxiety and butterflies and nervousness, and not letting yourself go down a bad path of like, oh, I'm going to screw this up. It's like, no, put in the work. I'm nervous because I care.
I'm
and
excited.
I'm excited, and everyone
Because there's
here
a
can
fine
learn
line
something.
isn't there a fine line between being like stressed and excited in a situation like that when you're prepared?
Yep.
When you're prepared, yeah. You just settle down. But well, everything that you said about the mindset and the depth of learning and the depth of rehearsing makes me realize how few people are interested and or cut out for something like that, like people, and the people
It's a big commitment.
I used to think like, oh, we should push people, not recently, but like we should encourage people, not push people to do it. But I realized that you will do it if you want to. It'll just start, you'll realize that it's hard work, but you won't be able to help yourself. You'll realize, like, you'll fail one time, you'll hear a talk like this, and you'll want to put in the work, and it'll be fun to take the notes, and it'll be fun to write on the whiteboard, and it'll be fun to, even though it's hard work, it's still kind of fun, like when you start to feel the things clicking into your brain, and they go into long-term memory, and then it's a part of you, and you're like, whoa, I didn't even know that stuck, and all of a sudden here I am just explaining it. Or but it seems like people just know. I get the impression, I've worked with a couple people in the Foot Nerd program, and I'm just trying to take really a hands-off approach, and those people just kind of start to inch their way on their own to the forefront to say, like, here's my stuff, this is what I'm doing, and then you just get to support them along the way. So I think that's going to happen more and more, and helps me to remember not to not to push.
Yeah. And it's almost, if you haven't made up the decision that you want to teach, then the first failure you have is you take as an indicator that this is not what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
Whereas if you have made up your mind that long-term is teaching is something you want to do, and you're taking a long-term approach, knowing that, like, the first time you do anything, you suck. There's ways to train up to make sure that it's not a catastrophic suck, but you're not going to be great because you've never done it before. And it takes reps and practice. And so the first failure for someone who, and failure is very subjective, right? Like not getting good vibes from the people there, which might not be your fault, right? Maybe they weren't as interested in learning as they thought. Can be like, okay, well, I have to be better next time. I have to teach differently. I have to ask every student, like, what did you like? What didn't you like about the way I taught this? Was the material boring? Was it not engaging enough? Should we have done this? Like, actively seek feedback to determine how you can get better. I think that's a really big thing that people don't think to do, but is very important. Like listening to your own podcast, painful. I don't know about other people, but for me, it's painful. But it's essential to build some self-awareness and be like, okay, well, here's one thing I like that I did. Here's one thing that I want to avoid next time. And like reading those notes right before you do another podcast. People, this is all behind the scenes stuff that people just assume, like people like Joe Rogan or the best podcasters in the world, they're just naturals. It's like, no, they practice a lot and they're committed to their craft. And you don't see all the work that they do to get to that point. Yeah.
You have craft on your shirt.
Committed to the craft. And yeah, you just have to want to do it. It's like a fart. If you force it, it's going to be shit. So don't do it.
Oh no, that's hilarious. Okay, but you mentioned about when I was doing my yoga training, that was the number one thing that I got so much from, is my teacher. After every time we would teach a class, we would go into the office and he would say, name the 3 things that you did well and the 3 things that you want to improve on. And it just was so concrete. The feedback, I wanted to say, before you solicit feedback from the students, you do that exercise yourself. What did I like? What were the 3 things I did well that were successful? And what were the 3 things that I want to improve on, or that I noticed that I didn't include and I should have, et cetera, et cetera. But that seems like that's the most important thing. And then getting feedback from the participants. What do you think about that?
I like that because it actually makes sure that your perception aligns with reality, or that you're
Mhm.
reading things. Because I think a teacher really has to read. Like, I would meet, whenever people came to a seminar, I would meet them all. I would understand their name, give them a hug if they were into hugs, and I would ask one thing about them, like, why did you come to this? And it allowed me to get a read for the room, and also just like those three questions, I would know the person who's like very introverted and shy. So I knew that when we did a partner drill, I would like partner some people up, just say, oh, you two should go together, or like, I'll go with you. And like, you have to read your audience a lot in terms of how they're reacting, how they're engaging, and all these things are just like things that you start to notice over time as you go down the teaching rabbit hole, and you do a lot of teaching. And digital teaching is very different. It's not as like,
Mhm.
you don't get as much input. It's a lot harder to do, I think.
Mhm.
But if we had like a core group of people, of foot nerds or health guides that have committed to teaching, I think doing like a monthly call to sharing stories about
Mhm.
our process of teaching and what we're learning, because like there's things you can learn about being a better teacher that go really deep.
Mhm.
And it's not, you don't necessarily learn them by practicing what you do. You learn them about learning what good teachers do, right?
Mhm.
Like the theory of good teachers, of like the mindset that these amazing teachers, which most of whom are very smart, but some people are great teachers and they don't need to know their thing very deeply. It depends what
Yeah.
they're teaching.
Yeah.
And I know that the best teachers I ever had in my school career were just the people who I could tell cared and who actually engaged you. Like, I hated chemistry because I had the most boring chemistry teacher in high school. I loved physics because my physics teacher was like the most awesome dude ever. And if those two teachers switched, I probably would have hated physics and loved chemistry, because it
Mhm.
wasn't actually the topic. It was the skill of the teacher and how well they made me want to learn a subject by making
Yeah.
it tangible, by making it fun. And I think that part of it with health is it's gotten kind of boring, right? Like, um, we talk about health, we talk about like diets and exercises, and like
Mhm.
that's some boring shit. That doesn't even,
Mhm.
that's like, I want to talk about the principles of health. Like the other day,
Mhm.
someone came by Heart of Hindenburg, and we were talking about health, and I was like, how do you define health? And she was like, oh, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that. And we just like worked through it together, and it was really fun to get that person's perspective and learn from her. And she probably
Mhm.
learned from what I had to say. And it was
Yeah.
like a bi-directional thing where every interaction is an opportunity to both be a teacher and a student.
Yeah.
And it's really, you have to know kind of what mindset you want to go in with, so that you and know what kind of relationship you're about to have with this person. um, but I think being a teacher comes naturally to those who put in the work and find meaning in sharing it with others.
Yeah.
So
You know what the secret to life is? Timing.
I think you've done that one on me before, but not in a while. I was going to think there for a second. Yeah, timing is a key in life.
What else do we have to say, Nikki Pop? Is that a wrap?
I think that's pretty much it. I think anyone can be a teacher. Just you got to really want it, and you got to be motivated to want to be good at it. I think
Mhm.
that's like, and
And the
podcasting is a
digital,
powerful teaching way in the digital world. Despite
yeah.
being in a classroom full of people, human energy
Mhm.
in person is
Mhm.
like the
Mhm.
apex. But like the fact that you can now learn from anyone on planet Earth, and it's accessible for free for everyone, that's
Mhm.
magical stuff. So
Mhm. Yeah. All right, Nikki Pop.
that was great.
That's a wrap. This is a wrap. I won't hang up on you. I'm just going to
Okay.
stop the recording.